It's becomes, for lack of a better word, intoxicating for the customer, or the member or the potential member. When they go up to the airstream we have, which is at the very top of our vineyard, they're looking throughout a good section of Anderson Valley, um, seeing the vines, seeing the valley, seeing where the sun sets, seeing the clouds, seeing what they often think are hawks, but are the vultures circling in the sky, and having that glass of wine that connects into the sense of place. It's very hard to replicate that experience. For us, from the business side of it, it's a no-brainer. The conversion rate that we have of guests who stay on the property, who join our wine club and become, lifetime members, it's amazing. So that's the stuff that happens after the hour when the tasting room closes, when our staff goes home. Our guests get to just immerse themselves in the experience of our region, in our little microcosm, our section of Boonville, and really get to feel the experience of enjoying that wine and knowing, oh, we actually today sat with the owner, the general manager, the winemaker, all the people who have a lot resting on this business. And it really resolves some of that identity crisis that the wine industry, I think, is going through at the moment. That, how do you tell a story when so often the people you interact with on a daily basis are disconnected from the true operations of the business? So that's, I've heard multiple times the charm of Anderson Valley is, oh my God, I just went to the winery and I sat with every major player from this organization. And so the Airbnb really does help to connect those dots.
Welcome, everybody, back to the Barrels and Roots podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Trace, and I have an awesome guest with me today. Would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Right. So I am Shawn Phillip. I am presently the general manager and winemaker for Lykan Estate and Brago Cellars.
Awesome. How did you get started down this path of wine and all that?
It's a very long story for everybody who works in wine. I've listened to many of your podcasts, so us winemakers are long-winded. Um, For me, it honestly started in the world of tech and telecom. I had a career in sales and sales management for AT&T, and in the tech world, everybody has a position that's hyperinflated, both title and salary. So at some point, I chose to learn about wine, uh, and while using that background. Um, After years and years of growing in that business, I developed a love and an admiration for wine. So at some point, I had to decide that I was going to change my careers. And I'd left San Francisco, moved up to Sonoma County, and took a position where I was managing all the sales for uh, the ultimately the county of Sonoma, and had some mentors who I entrusted to help me figure out what the next step in my career was. And one in particular said, "Hey, it's not uncommon for somebody in their 30s to quit their job, go back to school, get another degree, travel the world, and become a winemaker." So it was really you know, a leap of faith to exit something that was so comfortable with me. Ultimately, I spent, a little over a decade in the winemaking end of all of this, and realized that particularly I had a strength in leadership, management, business. And so was really excited to go back to school, pursue an MBA degree, and then, really seek towards hybridizing all the elements of both winemaking and winery management.
That's awesome, man. And it's interesting too because, not everyone knows about Anderson Valley. You make wine in Anderson Valley, which most people have never heard of. What makes the place special, and why should someone who loves Pinot care about it? And I love Anderson Valley. Like, I would come up there, and there's a brewery that my brother and I would go play frisbee golf at. It's one of my favorite places to go, man. And so, talk to me about how you found yourself up in Anderson Valley and why people should care about it.
One of the more interesting things about Anderson Valley, and as soon as you go up there, you'll realize it, is the orientation of this region is entirely different from most of the other wine growing regions. physically and metaphysically. It's Anderson Valley. Um,
Right.
but it's similar to what we see down in Santa Barbara. It's an
Yeah.
east-west oriented valley, which has a magnificent impact on daily impact from the Pacific, the ocean, what the wind looks like. I had the pleasure of really digging deep into the entire world of Pinot as a younger man, both exploratory and professionally now. And what I always found is that, the grapes that grow in this region really tell the story of where they are, just like any other place, Russian River, Sonoma Coast, and ultimately Anderson Valley. The most amount of Anderson Valley fruit I ever made was when working with Schramsberg. Um, and so that was really wonderful to pursue it, perceive it both from a still wine and also a sparkling wine perspective. Um, and yeah, so the first thing that everybody needs to know about the region is that, w just like everything else, the Pinot Noir grape really expresses itself best, in that area. It showcases you when you taste an Anderson Valley wine, you know what it is. Ultimately, the high winds we get from a east-west oriented slope lead to these really thick skins, a tannin that's both intense but also balanced, a lot of ripe red fruit. Um, yeah, it's just another region in world-class California Pinot Noir that shows the best of what it can do.
I love that. It's interesting too because everyone knows the bigger wine regions, but yet, like, some of the best wines I've had have been coming from Anderson Valley. And, you manage 2 brands and 4 custom crush clients under one roof. Can you explain, well, like, what a custom crush actually means and why a winemaker would do it?
Right. So a custom crush facility, which is a large component of what we're doing at Lykan Estate, many wineries have a license that allows them produce, a certain gallonage, certain tonnage of fruit annually. However, rarely do any wineries meet that limit. So with the custom crush component, what that allows is for other wineries that don't have the traditional brick and mortar building to use another facility to carry out their winemaking vision. And the range of the clients that you'll see are everything from extremely professional, hyper organized winery that has a winemaker and they're delivering fruit with instructions and it's under their guidance to smaller vanity labels where it's, someone has a vision for having a wine brand and they need complete hand holding from grape to bottle to carry out what it is that they seek in their wine brand. And we see the entire range of that at Lycan and Brago. So for me as a winemaker, the challenge that I face is to sit and consult with these brands and really understand what their vision and goal is, and together come together as a team to be able to exact that. It's similar like how we operate for the Brego side of the equation that I work on with our vineyard partners is, everything starts with a conversation so that we can come together and work as a team to um, achieve that shared vision.
I love that. Yeah, I love the idea of, like, everyone coming together to work on a shared vision. Because at the end of the day, um whatever you're creating, if you can have a team working toward the same thing, it's such a beautiful thing. And I mean, and you can create something excellent. And like, I want to ask about excellence because you've scored 92 to 95 points consistently with Decanter and Wine Enthusiast. Like, what does a score like that actually mean for the person standing in a wine shop trying to decide what to buy? Because I love wine, but I don't know all the ins and outs, and I wanna help other people understand that too. Can you help me, like, get a little grasp of that?
All right. So the scores are really just a starting point for understanding wine. Ultimately, what the scores mean is that some professional at a given point decided to taste your wines, evaluate them across a matrix that he or she uses to judge wine, and determined that in the same matrix by which we go through the schooling system, uh, evaluated the wine. Now that only goes so far because when as somebody who's new coming into wine, what does a score mean? It kind of helps them out and says, okay, there's a pro out there who evaluated this. Um,
Mhm.
but it doesn't tell you who made the wine, how they made the wine, what the region is, what the vintage was like, stylistically the approach. All of those things are the greater variable in what winemaking is. So while a score seeks to be a launching point from which to tell a story about a wine, there's always a bigger piece. Something I've found, I hear a lot of criticism in the professional side of wines about, oh, these scores, they're irrelevant. It's a dated metric. Um, it doesn't tell the full story of a wine. But we also have to understand, which is going back to the sales element of wine, not everybody is a professional who's living in the North Bay who drinks wine daily and weekly. The biggest consumer are the people who do not live in wine growing regions. And the reason that there's so much gatekeeping and all these other things, that the wine lingo, the jargon that we use to protect this lovely industry in which we work, also seeks to alienate at times the people that we're trying to draw into what we do as a business. So while I can at least agree on some terms that the scoring system is imperfect, um, until somebody can propose a better method to to showcase what we do as winemakers and wineries, I think we have to actually lean into the scoring system.
It makes sense. You have to have something, you know what I mean? I think it helps people. Greatest basketball player debate. Is it Michael Jordan? Is it LeBron James? Is it, everyone's gonna have an opinion. But we have to try to find some way to judge who's better or not, who's great. And it might come down to total points. Well, that's going to be LeBron. It's going to come down to championships. Well, that's this, it's like, you have to think of these things. But if we have no metric, how do we even, look at things objectively? And I think that that's thing, and like no metric is perfect. But if we don't have one, we're going to be sitting there, trying to figure things out all the time,
Every parent is going to have a hand turkey that their kid painted at school, put on the
Right.
refrigerator, and it's the most
Right.
beautiful piece of art you've ever seen. It's not the Mona
Right.
Lisa. And so,
100%, man.
you know, that's kind of how I view the system. It's like, yes, we need to take into account all the hard work that the winemakers and the cellar team and everybody involved in production puts forth, and yet we still operate in a competitive world. And so those are the moments where we have to acknowledge that there must be a grading criteria to evaluate the final product.
I love that. And I think it's a very straightforward way to look at something. I wanted to ask you this other question too. Now, you trained in Champagne, France, but what did making sparkling wine the traditional way in France teach you that you could not have learned anywhere else?
First and foremost, I was really lucky to get that internship. A quick anecdote: when they posted that on the UC Davis website, I immediately transcribed my resume via Google Translate, sent it over, knew that if I wanted to impress the French, I had to speak in their language. I received an immediate letter back saying, "That was very cute. Clearly, we understand you speak English. Send it in English next time. You butchered our language."
Uh,
So part of that goes into understanding the legacy and the history. The family for which I worked was an eighth generation wine grower. This is
wow.
out of anything that we can conceive in American winemaking. So one of the things I learned is that it is so important to build heritage, legacy, understanding that what you do today has an impact on what we do tomorrow.
Yeah.
Um, we're as Americans culturally, we are the progeny of those who walked away from Europe to come here and start something new. And
Hmm.
so when we look at winemaking, and I hear this all the time, it's like, we're going to disrupt. We're going to change this. We're not doing the old way anymore. It's something new. It's very you know renegade as us Americans can be. What I loved about Champagne is going back and understanding that they are the most heavily regulated, the most restricted wine growing region in the entire world. And yet the challenge they face every year is, how do we do better than last year? How do we innovate? And how do we
Mm,
operate within the constraints of what we're allowed to do? And so that's
mm,
something I've been able to take back with me in making wine and, operating in the wine business here in the States is I've chosen to work with these great brands that all have a legacy in one way or another. And so how do you preserve that? And that's something that I really took back. Like when you're sitting with the eighth generation winemaker, he knows that it's his name actually means something in the world of wine,
right.
and what can he bring to carry forth to the next generation.
Right? It's interesting that when you meet people that have that sway, that pull, that lineage. I got to meet this person one time that was, I was studying Chinese medicine, and the person's family had been doing it for like 15 generations, and you're like, man, I don't even know what my ancestors where they were 15 generations ago. The fact that your family knows exactly what they were doing is wild to me, you know? And so I want to ask too, because a lot of people are, from what I've heard, are intimidated by cool climate wines. How would you explain what cool climate actually does to a wine, in plain language, none of the fanciness? I don't understand any of that.
It really slows down the entire ripening process. It's
Okay.
as simple as that. One of the fundamental, simplest ways to understand anything is heat makes things go faster. If you
Mm,
can summarize chemistry into a statement, it's yeah, heat makes it go faster. And we see the same thing in grape growing. So in warmer climates, you accelerate not only just your sugar accumulation, but all of the other parts of the grape that lead to the aroma and the flavor. Once you vinify that, it's all accelerated. In cool climate growing, everything is slowed down. And so that's why when you look to grapes, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Riesling, Gewürztraminer, they're looking for a climate in which uh, the acid balance is is aligned with the sugar accumulation. So it's why when you taste something from a cooler region, Anderson Valley, Sonoma Coast, uh, there's a purity of the fruit. All the fruit components are layered. They're not muddled. They're not macerated or jammy. I think would be an easier way to say that. Um, and it adds to that complexity that you get in the glass. So it's just it's a type of growing region that allows the fruit to really shine and showcase without the rush to pull it in before it's really mature.
you gotta give things time. And I think that everyone wants to do everything fast in life, you know? And at least in our world right now, fast is kind of the default, whether that's good or bad. Fast is kind of the way people do things. But it's not always, it's not the only way, and it's interesting to see cooler climates where I was fascinated by the Greenland shark, the shark that lives in cooler climates that lives to be like 200 years old, man. It just sits down there and it's so cold and like everything's cold and slow. But I want to ask you this too, because you run the business side too, all types of parts of the business. Like most people think winemaking is all romance and barrels. What does the unglamorous side of it actually look like? And I've heard there's a lot of cleaning that goes on.
Sure. Well, the cliche end of it is the late nights, the cleaning, the sanitizing, the scrubbing, the peak moment of harvest when everything breaks and you're thrown into that situation of having to make a split second decision of how to still move on forward with the wine harvest and yet also know that things aren't going your way. For example, last year in our harvest cycle, actually, no, in 24, not 25, our cooling system crashed the second day of sparkling wine harvest. And so one option would be for us to move onward and to barrel ferment everything, but that would change our style. So we at Lykan Estate had two cooling systems. What we were ultimately able to do was create a patchwork to daisy chain all the tanks that we had to keep the cooling and change the thermostats back and forth between tanks so that everything stayed even keeled. And then also rapidly the next day plumb the entire wall, build out another cooling system, and get back and set. So it's one of those things where that's the non-glamorous harvest operational side of it. But another non-glamorous side is that everything in winemaking has a financial element to it. So it's not just the unpleasant side of digging out and cleaning a tank and getting dirty. It's more, okay, well, how do we plan for the type of press we want to bring in? What's the style of wine we make and how do we achieve there? Because every instrument, every tool that we have in the winery will deliver the results of something when used correctly. So, for example, I remember as a younger man working a harvest at a winery. They destemmed all their Pinot Noir. It did not get crushed, and I remember asking the winemaker, "Why do you destem and not crush?" He said, "Oh, it's simple. We don't have a crusher." So there's always this like logical and pragmatic component to the winemaking, and that is an output of how does the company want to operate? What are the tools and resources it has available? Uh, you know, so oftentimes there's the classic debate between finance, operations, and winemaking, and they're not always aligned. And so you have the artistry of the winemaker butting heads with the CFO who said, "Well, here's the brass tacks. Here is what we can afford to do." So seeking that balance is something that is one of the more challenging parts. More often than not, you have the business side of winery operations, which is independent from the winemaker. So in my position, it's really balancing, seeing the numbers, understanding our financial ability, and then going back to we want to put the grapes in the winemaking first. How do we do that with what we have available?
There's always that balance between art and money that any creative enterprise has. I deal with it when I make videos. I go and make a video for a company or if someone and they're like, I want all this stuff. And I was like, yes, yes, you do. As do I. As do I. But what can we do with that? How much can we afford? I want the super drone shot. I want a helicopter flying in. I was like, oh, yeah, me too, man. I would love that as well, but can't always get that. And like when you find out like what you can actually do but there's a lot you can do, and I think that that's one of the things too, is like as you balance those two sides, you find that beautiful messy middle where most of the creative, stuff is really coming from, And I wanted to ask you this because I love asking winemakers about grapes that they love and grapes they love to hate. But, I've heard Pinot has a reputation for being one of the most difficult grapes to grow and make. Why is it so hard and why do winemakers keep chasing it anyway?
In simple answer, I think Pinot is the most transparent grape there is. So I look back to my time at Davis doing the academic point of that part of my career. And I remember having a lot of classes that would teach you there's all these myths in winemaking. Terroir isn't real. I still love that professor, by the way. But these ideas that there's no way to evaluate and taste and really have the sense of place built into it. To date, 20 years later, after drinking wine and working with wine every day of my life, there is a fundamental difference between Anderson Valley, Sonoma Coast, Russian River, Burgundy, Côte d'Ivoire. All these areas really showcase in the grape. I think what happens is that there is such rigid conditions under which you have to grow, how you treat the grape, how you pamper it along. And like some other more structured grapes out there, you can't simply doctor it up and make a wine that is easy to drink. Pinot Noir has that true natural beauty. it will tell its own story. The goal is to allow it to speak rather than, put some lipstick on it, put some earrings on it. The grape really does want to show who it is and where it's from better than anything else. Uh, it's funny, like I've also heard many times in winemaking, oh, what's your favorite clones? What's your favorite, soil type? And the answer, it varies at every vineyard, every clone, every soil type. Pinot Noir really shows what it does under those conditions. So it's I think the hardest one to wrap your brain around, only because there's no straight answer. It exists in this place of mystery and mystere, and I think that's why we all as winemakers keep coming back to that love of Pinot Noir.
What's your favorite wine? Or if you're gonna pour yourself a glass, what are you gonna pour for yourself?
Right. So the grape I know the most about is Pinot Noir. The style of winemaking have really leaned into is sparkling wine, and I professionally know a ton about that. But my wife and I are keeping Chardonnay in business. So single-handedly, if there was any kind of wine, it's either both Russian River Chardonnay or Chassagne Montrachet.
That's awesome. If you were gonna have someone come to meet you and you wanted to get them into wine by pouring them 3 glasses, what 3 glasses are you pouring?
Right. Um, I think one of the easiest places to start, and this is going to be entirely contradictory to my career, is, 3 different Cabernets from Napa, going from the south end to the middle district to the north end. What despite me working in cool climate grapes, it requires having an ability to see the difference in winemaking. And I think that there's no better place in the entire world of winemaking to showcase than this microcosm of Napa Valley, and Cabernet wears that as well.
Yeah.
If we go back to Pinot Noir for a moment, it's such a nuanced grape that by the time you get to start evaluating different soil types, temperatures, degree days across all of that, it's nerd stuff that the average introductory wine drinker can't wrap their heads around. But you
Mhm.
can show Cabernet on one single region where, it's 2 to 3 degrees difference every day throughout the growing season, north to south, valley floor, and here they are. There's, it's easy to pick up out those components. And so what I love about the Napa Cabs in that regard is that it can really lead people who are feeling uncertain about their technical winemaking jargon, how you describe it. They have that aha moment. It's very easy to pick that apart and see what those differences are. So, I love American wine. I think we do a bang up job here in the States. And while my career is on the coastal side of things, if I had to introduce anybody at the introductory level, we'd be going through some Napa cabs.
I wanna ask you, if someone wants to start understanding wine better but doesn't know where to begin, what is one thing that you would tell them to do first?
uh, Taste all the time. The very first thing,
Right.
I'm lucky how I got into this. I had a buddy who was the buyer for the Chalet restaurant group in San Francisco. So while I enjoyed wine, he was at the time receiving over a case of wine samples a day of different wineries that wanted to get into his restaurant groups. So we were able to sit down and evaluate 12 wines a day. And, going back to what I said a moment ago, I was really uncertain. It's that whole thing where people start using words that you don't know what they mean. You're not sure if they're being honest. You're, it's really intimidating getting into wine. But to be able to sit and taste every day and flex that component of your brain and actually think about what am I tasting? How do I describe this? Go wine tasting. It's the place to be. It's very hard to learn about wine unless you're tasting things consecutively. I love the flights at wineries because you get to see what we'll call a vertical or start to finish of lighter to full bodied wines. But after you've gone wine tasting a few times, Go to your local wine bar, ask them to pour 3 of the same varieties in front of you
Yeah.
where you can taste the difference and see what that looks like. Um, it's always worth it for us to go back to that same debate, old world, new world. Like have the wine bar pour a couple wines from you that are from different regions globally, not just the same region, and so you can see how that grape expresses itself. Um, but the most important thing is just have fun with it. We're still making wine at the end of the day. We're in a luxury business, and while it's a very serious industry, I think at that initial stage you have to have fun with it.
I love that. I think wine is supposed to be fun. It needs to be fun. But, and that's one of the things, like, I like that you have this experience there. You also run an Airbnb at the winery. What happens when someone stays there? What does that kind of experience do for the way people connect with the wine?
It's becomes, for lack of a better word, intoxicating for the customer, or the
Yeah.
member or the potential member. When they go up to the airstream we have, which is at the very top of our vineyard, they're looking throughout a good section of Anderson Valley, seeing the vines, seeing the valley, seeing where the sun sets, seeing the clouds, seeing the what they often think are hawks, but are the vultures circling in the sky, and having that glass of wine that connects into the sense of place. It's very hard to replicate that experience. For us, from the business side of it, it's a no-brainer. The conversion rate that we have of guests who stay on the property, who join our wine club and become, lifetime members, it's amazing. So that's the stuff that happens after the hour when the tasting room closes, when our staff goes home. Our guests get to just immerse themselves in the experience of our region, in our little microcosm, our section of Boonville, and really get to feel the experience of enjoying that wine and knowing, oh, we actually today sat with the owner, the general manager, the winemaker, all the people who have a lot resting on this business. And it really resolves some of that identity crisis that the wine industry, I think, is going through at the moment. That, how do you tell a story when so often the people you interact with on a daily basis are disconnected from the true operations of the business? So I've heard multiple times the charm of Anderson Valley is, oh my God, I just went to the winery and I sat with every major player from this organization. And so the Airbnb really does help to connect those dots.
My sister ran a small was, the tasting room manager for a tiny winery up in the, Anderson Valley a long time ago, and she had a house that came with that job, and we would go up there, and I would stay, and I would just sit on the porch, and from sunrise, I just watch the sunrise, and it is such a magical, beautiful place, and you sit there and it was one of the places, like, California can be a, go, 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 bustling place, even like Napa, Calistoga, like, it gets busy. It's very slow compared to, big cities, but it's still busy, but when I was up in Anderson Valley, it was so peaceful, and I can't say that I've ever experienced that I haven't experienced that in many other places, and the cool climate, it's just a very magical place up there, so, it's always been special for me.
It's unique to say the least. I really did love that after post lockdown, the amount of folks who, because Mendocino County did open up a little more
Yep,
rapidly and easily than some of the other regions, say Sonoma and Napa, in proximity to San Francisco. People would come up and they'd be mesmerized, like, oh my God, there's this part of wine country that's still relatively untouched as compared
yep,
to the areas with which they're more familiar. And yet it truly is that peaceful. There's 2 mountain ridges that come together that really block off the convenience factor of coming up.
yep,
When you've come to Anderson Valley, you made a trip to Anderson Valley.
yeah.
Um, I do always like the first question I ask everybody that comes in our tasting room is like, "Oh, what were your plans for dinner? What did you book?" Because we do have no shortage of guests who are used to all the accommodations of Napa and Sonoma, and I just want to make sure that they have somewhere to eat for dinner because we don't always have that same infrastructure. So as long as I think you're willing to let go of all the conveniences that are abundant elsewhere and immerse yourself in the simplicity and the beauty and the rusticity of what Anderson Valley is, it can be an eye-opening experience for you.
It's awesome. Where can people go to learn more about you and what you do?
Right. Well, I would love to direct you to come visit me at Lykan Estate in Brago Cellars. You're almost guaranteed to meet me. But other than that, the only the profile I have is LinkedIn, Shawn Phillip, General Manager and Winemaker at Lykan Estate.